You're going from Universal now at Disney.
I made them an incremental $300 million in 2.5 years. My parents always taught me, work hard, do the best job you can.
How did you come into the world of marketing and the world of sales?
People don't leave once they do that. I mean, everybody that I worked with thought I was insane for going from this little company that nobody had ever heard of, threatening to sue us, you guys are con artists. And then when I asked for a $10,000 pay raise, I got told to go pound sand.
Mason, welcome. How you doing, buddy?
What's going on? I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Look, where I'd like to get started is I just want to hear, how did you come into the world of marketing and the world of sales?
Oh man, super convoluted path, to be honest. So the family business, so to speak, is extreme sports. My dad helped start the X Games back in the day. I was on track to be a professional wakeboarder at one point. And so I kind of thought, it was cool. It was a cool way to grow up.
That's awesome.
Get to do all these fun sports and travel all over the world and stuff, doing the sports that we were doing. So I thought I wanted to go into the family business, of sports basically. And so I went to school for sport management, worked at a couple action sports facilities. I worked at a snowboard park, and then I was a GM at a wakeboard park while I was still in college. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I left college a semester early to go take this GM job at a wakeboard park in Texas. And this was supposed to be the dream, right? And I was so pumped because I was getting to do it without even having to graduate. And so I was like, forget this. I don't need a college degree. I've got the skills. I've, grown up in this. I've worked in this for a long time. And it was terrible. I was working 100 hours a week outside in Texas in the summertime. Also, I thought I was going to go just run the park, and when I got there, it wasn't built yet. So I ended up working construction, which I had zero experience in. In Dallas, Texas, in 110-degree heat, and it was just brutal. And I'm managing, 60 employees for 35 grand a year. Could barely pay my rent. And I'm like, this probably ain't it. This is supposed to be the dream job. I'm running a $2 million facility with 60 employees. Where do I go up from here to make more money? I probably can't, because the thing is, any job that's cool is probably not going to pay well. And they don't tell you that when you're going to school for it. And so I was like, all right, I got to get out of this. So I did that for a year. And once wintertime hit and the park kind of slowed down, I was like, I got to figure something else out. And I just kind of got to thinking and talking with some mentors, well, I'm pretty decent at this marketing thing and I kind of like it. So I helped build their website, and I ran their Facebook page, and I ran our first couple of ads and negotiated our ad buys in the local newspaper and did all that kind of stuff. It just fell under me as the GM because we didn't have a marketing person per se. Sure. And so my thought was, well, I think I'm going to go do that because I think I can do that in the air conditioning and make more than 35 grand a year. So I went back to school, finished out my last semester. And then I did an unpaid internship where they taught me how to do basic SEO, basic Facebook ads, basic Google ads. And then I just I loved it and just kind of went from there, and then got an actual paid job doing that. So that was the sort of path through sports and into marketing, because marketing was always part of my jobs in sports, the couple GM positions I had running these facilities. And so that's just where I decided to focus on when I decided to change careers at the old age of 23.
Okay, I gotcha. So you kind of convoluted your way into that. You're now into the marketing world, and what are you doing? What are you starting to promote? What was the first business you were working with?
Back then? Yeah, so my first job, I started out super, super corporate, and then I got more and more entrepreneurial as time went on. So my first job was for Universal Studios. So I was running display banners for them. Next job was for Disney. There was another job I worked for a year in between there for a company nobody's heard of. But after Universal, basically made a quick pit stop and then over to Disney. At Disney, I started out with their smallest book of business, running their paid ads. That's what I primarily specialize in, is Facebook ads, Google ads, landing pages, that kind of stuff. And so at Disney, I started out with their smallest book of business and then eventually worked my way into being in charge of the entire Disney World portfolio of ads. So it was a $20 million budget. And that's really where I cut my teeth and really where I got good at this. Because I got thrown into the fire there too. I had the smallest book of business. I was a contractor. I wasn't even a real employee. And the person that owned the biggest book of business had to go out on maternity leave. And I was new, and they're like, well, let's give it to him because he doesn't have a lot on his plate. So I went from the smallest book of business to the biggest book, having to manage all this money and having to meet with multiple stakeholders and present in meetings. And it was trial by fire. It was a sink or swim moment. And it terrified me, but that's where I doubled down. It's I'm going to get so tenacious. learn all the data, learn how to speak to rooms full of people, learn how to sell ideas. And that's really where I kind of got good at my craft, was going through this gauntlet of having to take over this massive book of business. And then she came back from maternity leave, and then we went through a restructure. And so they put her in a different part of the company and gave that book back to me. And so I ran that for a couple years. Again, like $20 million annual budget. It was doing about 300 mil in revenue when I took it over. When I left 2 years later, it was doing 600 mil with only about a 10% budget increase. And they told me when I took it over, they're like, if you can grow this like 7% a year, like you're doing pretty good. I was able to grow it around 35-40% a year for 2.5 years, to where it basically doubled over that 2.5 years in terms of revenue with not a whole lot more spend.
And what do you think you were able to do, or like what do you think you did differently that allowed such huge growth?
Two things. One, it was just chasing the right data. So at the time, and this is going to sound crazy today, again, this is 10 years ago, but they were optimizing for orders, right? And agnostic of what the products were in there and agnostic of dollar value. Well, a theme park ticket's like a couple $100. A vacation package could be 15,000. And so, but we didn't have the pipes connected, and the tools back then weren't that great in terms of like getting the different order types and getting revenue passing back and forth. And so I really chased that, and I went through the extra work to get those pipes working and keep them working in my own accounts. And so just by going after higher quality customers, higher value orders, I was able to do a lot of that. The other piece is getting really close with the folks that we worked with at Google and Facebook. So I got all the new cool shiny stuff first. Whenever there was an alpha of like, hey, we have this idea, this new product we want to test, this new targeting type we want to test, like, will you be like the guinea pig for it? I always raise my hand, yes. And some of that stuff worked really, really well. And so I would have that stuff like sometimes get to use it 3 or 6 months before anyone else in the company got to use it. So that gave me an edge too. So I would say data integrity and then leaning into new tech early are the two things that really kind of set me up.
What was your mindset? You're a young guy. You now just got handed this huge book of business. Like, what's going through your head?
Oh man, I think it was that this is a pivotal moment. Like, I realized that it was a make or break moment, and I had eaten a lot of shit up to that point. When I was at my first job, I was the lowest paid on the team. My raises were never in line with anybody else's. Even when I went to the job after that, and then got paid a little bit better, it was a pretty terrible company that I worked for in between Universal and Disney. People were treated really poorly. That's why I was only there for a year. I got in and realized it was not a great place. So I was like, I'm going to stay here for a year, get my personal valuation up so I can like justify this new level of salary, and then I'll go somewhere else. So, I mean, I had eaten shit for 3 or 4 years, and I had also gone through, the whole journey through sports, which was also eating a lot of shit. And so I was like, this is like a chance to be, recognized as, kind of the top dog in the company, like within our division, within, the paid ads group. This is a chance to have the most responsibility, the most influence, get paid what you're worth finally after, kind of being undervalued for a lot of years. Like, you've got to do whatever you can to make this happen. So I worked more hours than anybody else. Again, I honed in on details that other people were not as focused on or were ignoring. But it was a make or break moment. It's like, this could set my resume up. This could define my career. If I screw this up and I'm going to lose this job, it's the best job I've ever had. It's not like you can screw this up and they're like, oh, no big deal. Here's your small book of business back. It's like, you're going to make this happen or you're going to get fired. So I saw the opportunity as a major pivotal kind of defining moment. And I just chased it with just absolute kind of reckless abandon and wasn't going to let anything sort of stand in my way of being successful, no matter what it took.
That's a pretty good track record, going from Universal now at Disney, right? Where did you go next? Like that seems like you're already high up on the rungs.
Well, so like I said, my journey's gotten more and more entrepreneurial. And the thing with big companies is it's hard to move up, and you're probably not going to get paid what you're worth. And so I made them an incremental $300 million in 2.5 years. And then when I asked for a $10,000 pay raise, I got told to go pound sand. And so that's where I went, okay. Like, my parents always taught me, work hard, do the best job you can, do a good job for the company, and you'll move up the ladder. I'm like, that's not really true. And people stay at Disney a long time. The only way that you move up is if somebody like gets hit by a bus or retires. And I didn't see either of those two scenarios happening anytime soon. And so it was at that moment where I clicked, like, it does not matter. I can put up literally like record setting performance and I will still not get my dues, still not get the progression. And that was just due to the corporate bureaucracy. What like my bosses both went to bat for me, and HR was still like, nope, not happening. And so that was where I realized like, okay, I'm on the wrong track. If I want to make real money, want to have control of my own destiny, I've got great experience now. You know, I'm not going to be undervalued anymore, but I need to find something different. And so I started looking around, and a recruiter from this tiny tech company that nobody had ever heard of, that wasn't profitable yet, hit me up and to go be their media buyer, and it involved taking a pay cut, going to a company that wasn't profitable. I think they had 6 months of runway when I joined them, but I got stock options in the company, and there was a chance to be ground floor and build this thing from the ground up. And so I said, okay, well, that sounds exciting, and it sounds like the complete opposite of what I've been doing. Complete different type of company. So I'm going to go do that and see if this works out better. Because I have a feeling, at least then I have ownership. If we build this thing and it sells, I'll get something for it. And so that was the next jump, was going to this tiny tech company. I was like one of the first 50 hires. I was the first in-house like ads person there. So that was sort of the next step I took from big corporate to teeny tiny tech startup.
Okay. And I mean, what at the top of the big corporate, you said you were dealing with a book of business grew by, it's like 23 million in ad buying.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
And
it was all Walt Disney World digital ads except for banner ads. But like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Google, for all Walt Disney products. So vacation packages, tickets, hotel rooms, dinner reservations, you name it, that all rolled up to me.
okay. And when you moved on from that and went down to the tech business, what did your book of business turn into? Like, what were you managing then?
Oh, at the tech company, I think when I started there, $30,000 a month. So I went from like $23 million to about $360K. So whatever that is, 90 something percent, 95% drop or something like that. So yeah, it was small, but much smaller. Way less spend. People thought I was crazy. Like at Disney, they thought I was nuts because again, people don't leave Disney, and like you've got this, shiny book of business that you had to work all this time to get, and you also have to work 18 months as a contractor before they let you become a real employee. So like people don't leave once they do that. I mean, everybody that I worked with thought I was insane for going from that to this little company that nobody had ever heard of.
And what did you take with that little company? Where'd you get it to? Within, let's say, the
So
first year.
I'll just give you the full journey. So when I joined that company, again, they were spending like $30K a month. They were doing less than $1 million in revenue a year. It's a software company, so they operate on a recurring revenue model. They're in the payment space, so they compete with like Stripe and Square. So when I joined, $1 million in revenue, $30K a month in ad spend. When I left, which was after our second big transaction, we were worth $1 billion. We were doing over $100 million in ARR. I want to say we were spending $1 million a month at that point, so 12 million annually, and we accomplished that in about 4 years.
Wow, that's a pretty big growth. I mean, I mean the 300 to 600 million is cool, but I think that is much cooler in my opinion.
Yeah, it was the funnest thing I've ever done. And so the company today, it's called Stacks Payments. They're still to this day, they're the only $1 billion tech unicorn to ever come out of Orlando, which is where I'm from. Nobody else has caught them yet. So they were like the biggest thing that had ever happened in my hometown. And I got to be in on the ground floor. I started as the media buyer, worked my way up into basically the head of marketing position. Ran us through a rebrand because when I joined, they were called Fat Merchant. But the goal was to eventually go public, and we were like, we cannot have our stock ticker symbol be FAT. So, and that stands
You
for
really
fast,
can't.
stands for fast, affordable transaction technology. But like the logo was a pig, and it was cool at the time. But we were like, we need to clean up. Like if we're gonna be looked at like Stripe, we're gonna be handling people's money. Like I don't think people want to be doing that kind of business with a company whose name is sort of a joke. So my last year there, we rebranded, and at that point, we're like a $400 million company. Like our logo is everywhere, our identity is everywhere. So let a full rebrand from Fat Merchant to Stacks, which is still to this day hardest thing I've ever done in my career. That's like a once in a career thing for most marketers. Hardest thing I've ever done. We did that.
What was the hardest part about it?
I think the scale of it is massive. You don't think about how many places your logo is, and then like the theatrics of the rollout, making sure everything is ready, because like you've got everything from your website to like our software had to get rebranded. So the engineering team is reskinning and rebranding our software. We're building a brand new website, which I had built websites before. That was the big kind of foil in the whole thing, is I had built websites before. I had never built an enterprise level website from scratch, with all kinds of animations, fully custom theme, 50 plus pages. And that's where I kind of underscoped and where stuff was really difficult, where we ran into those problems. But it's just a massive undertaking. It's a $400 million company. We had bought a couple other companies that we needed to like fold in and rebrand under the new label as well. So I just can't understate like the scale of it, thousands and thousands of things where the logo and name and colors have to get swapped out. And that's once we had the actual new brand set, which that was fun. That was cool. We spent about 90 days developing the new brand, new logo, new slogan, all that stuff. But the implementation and rollout of that was just a massive lift. And we only had like a 10 or 11 person marketing team. Like we had a really lean team. We didn't have any redundancies. We had one specialist for each thing, one copywriter, one graphic designer, one developer who basically developed the whole site. It was a lot on everybody.
So a good startup,
Oh yeah.
Running mean. So you were there for 4 years. You took it from about $1 million to $1 billion, literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In evaluation, anyway. And where do you go from there? Like what had you move on? Why did you move from that? That sounds like a pretty good gig.
So I tend to get bored easily. I like new challenges. I get restless. And all along, the goal had been, we're going to sell this company. Now, what we did is we sold a controlling stake, but not the whole company, twice while I was there. So there were two big transactions. But as I saw the company get bigger, things started to move slower. Culture starts to change. That's normal. It started to get, $1 billion company is very corporate, very different from the small company that I joined. And so I said to myself, I want to see us get to $1 billion, but then after that, like I'm going to go do something else. And all along, I knew the company was going to sell. Originally, the goal was to sell it for 100 mil. And so I was like, at some point, I'm going to have to go do something else. And supposedly, they were going to make sure that there were retention contracts in place and people could keep their jobs and stuff. But I was like, I'm not going to bank on that. And so I had actually, while I was at Disney, I had started freelancing. Like kind of on the side in the evenings, because Disney's a 9 to 5 job, and honestly, I could work 10 to 4 most days because I also automated a lot of my stuff too. So I was bored in the evenings and freelancing, and so I had built a freelance business up with my best friend over the years, and eventually it became like a real business. Like he left his full-time job to work on it full-time, and so that was kind of running in the background while we were building Stacks. And so I was like, at some point, if the agency business, the marketing agency business gets big enough, and Stacks hits this $1 billion point, I'm going to go and do my own thing. And it honestly worked out perfectly that we hit the $1 billion point, and the marketing agency was at a point where I couldn't do both anymore. Because I was working 50, 60 hours a week for the startup, and then I would come home at 6, 7 o'clock, eat dinner, and work till midnight on the agency business. I did that for like 2 years. So when we went through that $1 billion transaction, I was like, yes, cool, all right. Met my goal. Now I'm going to go do my thing, and not work 100 hours a week anymore. So I had this sort of master plan set up for a little while, because I didn't want the company to sell and, God forbid there's layoffs or consolidation. You just never know what's going to happen. So I always had this other thing sort of building, which is now our main business, which is, our marketing agency, Ascend It.
And now when you when all that's wrapping up, you're going into Ascend It full time. What kind of clients are you dealing with in Ascend It? Like, what's your ideal
so
fit, I guess?
We work in a couple different verticals. We try to stay focused within these three, but we work primarily with software companies, because that's my background, e-commerce businesses, because those are just fun, and we own a couple of them too. So we bring a little bit more experience as operators to the table in those types of businesses. And then we work with a lot of home services as well. So a lot of roofers, HVAC, larger ones, not like chucking a truck, like people that have a real office and a real call center, and are doing significant volume. So those are kind of our three main focus verticals that we've mostly worked in. We do some high ticket, some coaching, some mastermind stuff with people if they're big enough, bigger names we'll do some work with. So like Ryan Stuman's a client, Brad Lee is a client. A couple other guys as well. So we'll do some work in that space too, provided they have a big, strong brand.
what do you feel like is the, because you've now gone through, right? You've started at the bottom. You've literally helped build some of the biggest brands in that those spaces and those verticals. You've done, remind me of the amount in media buying you've done now, because you've spent an outrageous amount and returned
It's
an
nine
outrageous amount.
figures. It's around 120, between 125 and 150 mil.
Yeah, so a good amount of ad
Mhm.
spend. Now, if you're talking to my audience, which is very much within the high ticket space,
Mhm.
okay, what are some, whether it be we're talking a business owner, whether it be a media buyer that is in this space and helping grow a business,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that they should be focusing on today to be able to get the
Sure.
best leverage?
So the best thing you can do is brand building in terms of like organic brand building, like really building up your social media platform and your name on there. So like we're a paid ads agency, right? And we do run our own ads to generate our own leads, which a lot of folks don't do. But for the first year that I was full time in the business, like, and I had just left my other job, which meant I lost basically 50% of my income when I did that. We didn't have the funds yet to prove out our own ad funnel, and so I basically hammered the personal brand building as hard as I could because I couldn't brand build while I was head of marketing at that company. It just would have looked weird. And so as soon as I left, I had a whole plan of like, okay, I'm going to get photo shoots done, video shoots done. I'm going to post every day. And that really carried us and generated a lot of our business for the first year that I was full time on the agency until we could afford and had enough cash flow to comfortably spend the, 30 grand that it took to prove out a funnel. So, I mean, people really, they discount the social media side of things because, reach is limited now and it's a saturated market and all that. But I mean, I've pulled seven figures of business just out of my LinkedIn where I have 5,000 followers. And most of those were
Wow.
only added in the last 12 months. So, I mean, I've pulled seven figures worth of business out of a couple thousand followers. Like, you don't need a huge following. Just post consistently, just get started. You never know who's going to be watching. I mean, I've had people come out of the woodwork that I haven't talked to in years, but I was top of mind when they moved companies and when they needed a media buyer, or a performance marketing agency. Even when for one of our e-commerce businesses, we did a capital raise to start it. And my old boss from my second job, so I just did a post about it. He DM'd me, "Hey, I'm interested. Like, let's talk." And he invested. The recruiter that got me the job at Stacks, that's like 8 years ago now, also DM'd me, "Hey, I want to learn more about this." Did a pitch call with him. He invested. So I can't understate the power of that social media brand building, especially in the high ticket space, because you're asking for significant amounts of money. People need to build kind of a long relationship with you. They need to trust you. They need to watch you for a long time before they get to a comfort level. So I think that's really the biggest thing that you can do right out the gate. Because also, even when you're ready to start running ads, like those people might not have as long of a relationship with you, but because you're getting them to click an ad and go into your funnel, but they're going to want to see the social proof. They're going to still scroll way back in your feed, look at the type of engagement you get, look at case studies you've posted, all that stuff. So I think that's the biggest thing that anybody can do to build a business, kind of regardless of type, but even more so in the high ticket space. I think people look at you very skeptically if you don't have a strong social media presence in that space. And again, that doesn't mean followers. That just means you are active, posting good stuff, showing people what you're doing, giving them insight into your business and your life.
Yeah, I mean, man, I think it's huge, right? Like I look at there's a name in our space. I don't know if you know him, Matt Ryder, right?
Okay.
He's been known for building up. Well, you know Jeremy Miner,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So he
Yeah. A
he
couple friends
basically,
work for him actually.
cool. So he was the CEO of Seventh Level for a number of years. Took him
Hmm.
from starting out to 50, 60 million by the
Yep.
time they left um, in the sales training space. And you look at his Instagram and he has maybe like 20,000 followers.
Hmm.
But I know what his business has done, and those maybe I think it was at like 10,000 about a year and a half ago, right? So
Hmm.
like less than 10,000 followers, and he was generating multiple 7 and 8 figures a year
Hmm.
through exactly that, just being consistent on that personal brand. So
Exactly.
it makes sense when you see it, but then when you hear it from someone like yourself, where it's just like, oh yeah, okay, no, he's actually done these things.
Mhm.
This is important.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a huge brand name. Not that many people know who I am. I just started doing like some of the larger podcasts finally where I'm getting some serious reach. But I mean, I've been super under the radar for the last couple of years. And it's even worked for me. And I was even sleeping on some of the platforms. Like I only focused on LinkedIn for the first year on my business. I didn't do anything on Facebook or Instagram, and I still got 7 figures in 12 months just out of LinkedIn. And then I've gotten even more as I've added my, Facebook, added Instagram. Like I honestly did it wrong. I should have hit all three right out the gates, but I was kind of like, it takes time. And I felt kind of weird and cheesy, like doing the quote influencer thing. I was like, LinkedIn feels a little more professional and less cringy. I should have done all three at once, but my point is I did it really wrong. And still it worked for me and helped our business, get to the next level.
When you're looking for a business to work with, right? What are some of the key factors that you look for to know that you can actually come in and help, right? And realize that it's
Sure.
not, it is a marketing problem and it's not something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple different things. A lot of it just goes down to just the economics of the business. Is there enough margin? Like what's the margin in your product or service? There's got to be enough margin to where you can cover ad spend for and still have money left over. So that's really the biggest thing that we look at is how much, what's your profit on a transaction, and if it's big enough to where we think that we can come in under that amount with our ad spend to bring you customers, then it works. So that's the biggest thing. Second thing we ask about is sales process. How fast the lead's getting worked, who's calling them, who's selling them, what's the sales process, because that's a big one too, and where we can sometimes see a breakdown.
That makes sense. And have you had times like that? Do you mind like telling us a wee story about? I'm sure you have,
Oh yeah.
where the marketing's going, but because the sales wasn't in place,
Hmm.
it's not done what it's supposed to.
Yeah, so we had a roofer years ago who we worked with, and this is why we don't do the chuck in the truck thing anymore. We didn't know better at the time, but he hired us to do lead gen for him. We were hitting our marks on the leads. We were generating activity for him. And then like a month or a month and a half in, he just came at us just pissed, just threatening to sue us. You spent all this money. I haven't closed any deals. You guys are con artists. And like the way that we dispelled the whole thing was like, all right, well, that's odd. We're seeing activity. Like what, how many conversations are you having that you can track back? Oh, well, I don't know. Just my phone's not ringing as much as I think it should be. All right, that's weird. Are you using a CRM? We should have asked this. Again, this was years ago when we first started out. And we're like, well, what CRM are you using? Well, I just write it down, on a piece of paper in a notebook in my pocket, and then I call them back. I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, explain this to me. And so then we go, okay, well, what's your speed to lead then? And he like, how fast are you calling them? And he's like, well, it depends. If I'm in my car, then it'll be 5 or 10 minutes and I'll pull over. He's like, but sometimes if I'm standing on a roof, then, it might be an hour or two because I got stuff to do. We're like, oh my God, no wonder this guy hadn't closed shit. Like it's, he's getting people calling. He's not answering people when they call. He's calling them back God knows when. He's not tracking them in a CRM. I'm sure he's writing this stuff down in a notebook. So I know he's disorganized and he's probably got like plenty of good stuff in there. So that's the worst I've ever seen. But there's varying degrees of that. It can be like I'm trying to think of another example of it of just another example too is like certain companies where they've had a front desk person basically acting as an SDR or a qualifier. That's not always great because they're supposed to be an admin. They're not a salesperson. Those are different things. Just because the person filled out a lead form and said they want your product doesn't mean that you should have your admin calling them and trying to sell them. These are just different skill sets. That's one that we've seen several times actually. So those are kind of two of the cases. There's a million different ways the sales process can go wrong, but those are two that kind of stick out in my mind.
And when a business wanting to implement ads, when do you feel is the right time to actually swap from just being organic to implementing paid ads?
Yeah, so you need to basically be able to eat the cost. We tell clients this. You need to be able to eat the ad spend and eat our fee for like 90 days. Now, granted, you're not going to take straight losses for 90 days. Like the goal is we're going to probably take a straight loss in the first 30 because we're throwing stuff at the wall. The stuff doesn't work right out the box. Now, we do have templates. We do have a lot of experience in the industries that we work in. So we kind of have 80% of the recipe going in already dialed. But every business is a little bit different, every product, every service. But you need to be able to like eat this for 90 days. And then at the end of 90 days, you're going to be profitable. We're going to be hitting your goals. That's the timeline that we work on. And so that's the goal. But that can easily be, depending on the business, 30, 40, 50 grand that you need to be ready to invest. Again, depending on what the business is. If you're selling a higher ticket product, it can be, we tell people the more expensive the product, the more ammo it takes to prove out the funnel. So if you're selling a $50 e-com product, well, then you could probably spend 4 or 5 grand a month. That's plenty of ammo to get enough orders to get yourself, 50 to 100 orders. That's a lot of data. That's plenty to prove out. If you're selling, a $10,000 product, you're going to need to spend more, just because if we only get 1 or 2 deals in 90 days, that's not enough data to be like, yeah, this worked or no, this didn't work. Like, you're just, as the price goes up, you have to be able to spend more money. And that's different for every single business, based on their close rates, based on what the product costs, etc.
And something that I noticed as a shift within the high ticket space, but really within the whole industry, in my opinion, is it used to be people were optimizing and still kind of are optimizing for like book calls, right? Like someone to schedule in a specific time to have a conversation for whatever type of product and service, right? How do you find that compared to just having people opt in with, say, name, email, phone number where they've shown interest? Like, is it worth doing all the way to a book call, or are people better off going for an opt-in style?
I don't love either of those by themselves. So what I've found that works well for my clients in the high ticket space, my clients in the coaching space, in the mastermind space, is a tripwire product. Because when you're picking, like when you're taking a name and email or even a book call, the person doesn't have anything invested. It didn't cost them anything to fill that form out. And when you're offering, coaching or any program like that, like it's the person, you're probably not given the cost on the front end. And so you can just end up with a lot of unqualified leads. If you're like, hey, do you want to get better? Do you want to grow your business? Everyone's going to say yes. And they're going to fill that form out. And then a bunch of people aren't going to show up. A lot of the people that do are going to be unqualified. So that's why I like a tripwire product generally of, I say $9, I say under $10, but I have a client that's doing a $30 tripwire product. They're in the HVAC space, and he sells coaching to HVAC companies. And so he sells these flashcards. They're $30, and they're like objection handling flashcards. And then there's upsells all the way into coaching with him. But that's what I like is a tripwire product, because a lead that has already put down a credit card is the best quality lead. And people will upsell from $10 to $10,000 at a rate that you would not believe. Like books are a great, like, again, that client uses flashcards. Books are a great way to do this too. Another client that we do a book offer for, we know that basically for every 10 to 20 books that we sell, 1 or 2 of those people are going to upsell into a coaching program that's anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000. And we know what the uptick rates are going to be from that, and it's super, super consistent. So that's what I like for lead gen, is selling that kind of low ticket tripwire product. It also doesn't have to be a physical product, although I do think physical products are better. People like things that they can hold and touch and handle. Like, you're guaranteed they're going to interact with that if it gets sent to them in the mail. Versus a digital product, it might go right to their email, and then they never open that email. They never open the course. So it's a little more expensive to deliver something physical, but it's almost guaranteed they're going to interact with it. They're going to read through some of it. Maybe they don't finish the book, but like they've handled it. You've reminded them of who you are again. If they do read it, well, that's almost like pre-selling, right? They've read your book. They've gone through your, flashcards, or your mini sales course or whatever, and they like you. They've seen a little bit of your methodology, and they're going to be way, way easier to close versus an opt-in or just a straight book call. There's just no skin in the game, and there's no pre-selling that's happened.
And it's very interesting, right? Because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like a lot of people in traditional business, it makes sense. Like, that's something that's fairly common practice that you see. You see a lot of tripwire type styles where people are purchasing small things and then getting upsold on the back end. But you don't see it a lot in the high ticket space. Like, it's coming more and more. But why do you think that is? Why do you think, like, especially in the coaching and that side of niche? Because I know you do deal with a few of those clients.
Yeah. I think it's just the time and effort that it takes to build out whatever that thing is. Because I feel like you do see it a lot, but it's just with the big guys who have big names. True. Like Patrick Bet-David or Bobby Castro, they both do book deals. Grant Cardone's been doing book stuff forever, for $5, free, $10, whatever. The guys that are winning and that are the big names are all doing this and have been doing it for a long time. I feel like the smaller people or the people that are starting out don't do it, because writing a book feels like that's a big lift, right? Like that's a pretty big time investment. So I think, but again, it doesn't have to be that. It could be a video course, but I think it's just the time investment in creating that product and creating the funnel for it. Versus it's so much easier to be like, oh, I just want people to book my call, and I get that, but it's playing like the Tripwire product is playing the long game. It's going to take a little bit more investment up front, a little bit more work, but it's going to pay you back more consistently for a longer period of time versus a straight up book in. It's easy. It's just I think that's why so many people are resistant to do the Tripwire is just it's just more effort.
And what point would you say that it's like that you really do want to be making that switch, right? Like, are we talking, say someone's doing, they're not huge, right? I don't know, maybe they're doing $100,000 a month, right?
Sure.
So decent size, but definitely not like rockets.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the point to implement a tripwire? Can this work all the way down to someone that's doing like $20,000, or is this like only if you're doing a couple million? Like, what point would you say?
So, I mean, it comes down to you've got to be able to cover your ad spend. This goes back to almost like because you can do a tripwire offer, but if you don't have traffic going into that funnel or traffic seeing that offer, it's not going to do much for you. I mean, shoot, if you're doing 50 grand a month top line, that should be plenty. I mean, if you're top lining 50 grand a month, you should be able to pull off, 10, 15K to cover ads and management fees to start your funnel, I would think. Unless you're living super high in the hog or have a ton of overhead, like 50K a month should be plenty to peel off 20% of that, to get your engine built. And then after that, that's going to take you to the next level where you're going to be able to make 100 and be able to scale a lot better once that machine is built.
That makes sense. Okay, so kind of around that 50 mark would probably be a good point where you should be looking into what you can do.
For sure. And I'm shooting high there because again, I tend to shoot high with who like I'll work with. So that's like what it would take for me to work with somebody. Because I like more dollars means more runway, means more ammo, means a greater chance of success. I can crack almost any business, any funnel, given enough resources and a long enough time horizon. So somebody that has just more money and more runway and, they're not depending on this 10 or 15K to be able to eat this month or pay their employees this month, they've got the time and resources to where, God forbid, it doesn't go exactly how we want on the first try. If we can show them, hey, like we're not 100% there, but we're about 60 to 70. We've got line of sight to that 100. Can we go another month to get to the 100? They're going to be much more agreeable to that versus I've also found if you shoot too low and somebody's not ready, they're not going to honor the 90-day timeline. Like they'll say, yeah, I can do it. It's all good. And then in week 2, they're beating down your door. Like, why am I not making money yet? So that's why I tend to shoot high of like, when people make this jump, they need to be comfortable with it because it takes an investment. It takes a few months. I mean, I do this for a living. It took me about 30 grand to prove out our ad funnel for our agency in, ad spend over the course of about 4 months. So like that's a normal timeline and a normal proving out period for ads. So you just need to be able to cover that and stomach that. I don't want to work with somebody where I'm taking their last dollar or that's going to put them in a tough spot.
Makes sense. No, I mean, those definitely are the relationships where, well, I put strain on everything if it's their only dollar, right? And then there's too much pressure on every aspect of it. What would you suggest, just as to throw it in there for maybe someone that's just coming in, they're just starting their business, right? They're just getting going. Would you suggest implementing something like a tripwire right away from the beginning? Say if they're like just starting, or what would you suggest?
I think it's probably early. It's not a bad thing. There's no downside if you got the time to do it. Again, at that point, they're probably not going to have the cash to pay for traffic. So it's going to be, you're not going to sell that many of them. You're probably going to do most of your business early on through referrals, through friends and family, through your case study clients. So it's really more focusing on the organic building there, like scrapping, doing old school, selling over the phone, calling friends, calling family, asking for referrals, just kind of the old school hand selling to build up your initial base and making sure you absolutely crush it for those people so that you get good testimonials and get good referrals.
No, I get that. And then when you're coming in, you scale that you've proven concept. Now it's time to look, how can we scale this better?
Yeah, because you're going to need all that stuff for when you turn ads on. Like if you ever try to run ads to a funnel with no testimonials and no social proof, it's not going to work. So it's building a foundation still to get to those, next things that are going to help you scale. If you skip steps and like, let's say you were well capitalized and I just want to throw a bunch of money at it because I sold a company and have $1 million to burn or something like that, it's still not going to work as well as the guy that scrapped and clawed and got those case studies and built that foundation for paid ads and tripwire offers to ride on top of.
And walk me through, like you've probably built a few funnels, to say the least. What is a good funnel made out of, in your opinion?
Yeah, so a good funnel has a couple different elements. And when I say funnel, I'm going to talk more in terms of landing pages. We predominantly run ads. We don't build a ton of multi-step funnels anymore because that is a whole other skill set, and it's a beast to build a 6 or 7 step funnel with a bunch of upsells, downsells, whatever. So like we have partners that we refer out to do that, or the clients sometimes do that themselves or have a person to do that. So just with the level of complexity, it's kind of a different skill set. We want to focus on 1 or 2 things that we're really good at. So landing pages we're great at. Again, when you get into multi-step funnels, it's upsells and downsells. That's just more than we want to take on. And we're really awesome at ads. I mean, we're the best in the world at running paid ads. So we focus on those 2 things. But in terms of a great funnel or a great landing page, social proof is going to be the biggest thing. Again, testimonials, reviews. Needs to say what the hell your product does. You need to address your audience very early in the funnel. Like your funnel should address your audience in the first headline, and you should have if you sell to multiple audiences, you should have multiple iterations. So like my client in the home services space, it's the same set of flashcards, but we have a funnel that says HVAC at the top, and every single mention of an industry on that page is HVAC. We sell the same cards to plumbers, but every mention is plumbers. So like make sure your funnel is tailored to your audience is huge. Social proof I touched on. You also want to communicate in multiple different forms. Almost everything that you have in writing, you should also have in video. Some people like to read, some people like to watch videos. So you should pretty much have all the funnel content also in a video at the top that people can watch and absorb everything. Because some people like to read, and there's a lot of great funnels and landing pages that are super, super long, but some folks like to watch videos. So you want to meet the customer where they're at and address them in the medium that they're most comfortable in, which means both written and, video communication.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you're going to have some people that love to read. You're going to have some people that want to watch videos. You're leaving half the market if you only do one or the other.
Yeah. So, I mean, to summarize it, be very niche with your audience per funnel, address your audience, written and video, lots of social proof, also in both formats. Written, video, written with pictures of the people, screenshots of Google reviews, your Trustpilot ribbon if you have that. Like you can't do too much. So it's the same principle of having multiple mediums of that thing.
Now, Mason, if someone has been listening to this, right, and they are saying, all of that sounds great. I have the money. Everything's starting to be proven out, and they don't want to do it themselves. They want to work with someone like yourself. Yep. Where can they find you? Who do you best serve?
Yeah, so you can find me at masondorner.com. All my socials are on there at Mason_Dorner on Instagram, Mason Dorner on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find if you search me. So you can find me there. Again, our specialty is predominantly running paid ads. But if you need the other stuff, we know people who can do that. We can plug you in with people that do email and SMS. We can plug you in with people that do funnels. So we have connections that we can plug you in for anything else that you might need that we don't offer.
Awesome. Well, Mason, thank you very much for coming. Guys, I hope this was very informative. It's a little bit different from what we normally do, but I wanted to get a marketing expert in here because too much in our industry separates marketing from sales. But I feel like if we could have a better correlation, everyone wins overall. So you'll see a comment. You'll see in the description below a link to Mason so you guys can connect with him. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know who you want to see on next. Thank you.